Right, so our recording has started and we are good to go.
All right, so let us start the webinar, today's webinar. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'll have Greg speak to you more. And good afternoon, everyone. And if someone is not in India, outside India, whatever time you have, good morning, good evening. So welcome to this webinar on supply chain risk and maturity. As you know, the session is being recorded and it will be recorded and it's made available on KnoWerX mobile app as well as YouTube channel. We'll put everyone on the listen only mode. If you have any questions, please type in the chat box. We'll take the questions in the end. I also have received some questions as a response to marketing our webinar today. And we'll have this a question also answered. So to begin with, let me introduce Greg. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Greg Schlegel, CPIM, CSCP, CSP, Jonah. Greg is founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium, 28 companies who bring skills, solutions, and methodologies that identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risk. He is the supply chain risk guru, if I may say that. He has been a supply chain executive for several Fortune 100 companies, has been a supply chain executive consultant for IBM. He's executive in resident at Lehigh University, teaching supply chain risk management. Adjunct professor teaching enterprise risk management for Villanova University, is a EMBA program and VP principal at ShareTrack LLC. Greg was APIC's 1997 International Society president also. So I will not spend much time there. I mean, for Greg's, profile is much long. I cannot speak everything about you. Greg, over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Ravindra. Pleasure to be here with you all today to talk about our passion, actually two passions, supply chain management and good supply chain risk. We combine them together to talk about supply chain risk and maturity. So appreciate the opportunity to chat. As Ravindra said, hold your questions. Oh, you don't need to hold your questions, but I have a couple of slides that I'd like to walk through first to give you in the audience some context about the tool and the approach. And then as we get to the end of the slide deck, there's only about 10 slides. Then we can, open it up and spend the entire rest of the session on hopefully answering all your questions. So with that, I will move it forward, and I'll just give you a quick profile of our agenda. I do want to give you a little thumbnail sketch of the consortium, which I run. Then we'll talk about the actual readiness assessment tool, which some of you may have already exercised. We'll talk a little bit about value add through supply chain maturity. Why do that? Give you some industry testimonials on companies from multiple industries who have run through the tool as well. We'll give you a couple of thoughts on benefits of using the tool, and then we'll have an open dialogue. So with that, that's more or less what I'd like to convey to you before we actually get into Q&A. So stay tuned, couple of slides, let's take a look. I just want to give you a sense of this supply chain risk management consortium. It's about 12 years old. We, as Ravindra said, we're actually growing. We have about 31 companies now and 1,500 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. On the right-hand side, you can see all the members. We've broken it down into columns of, yes, we do education, yes, we have consultancies, and we bring a lot of supply software as a solution relative to our passion, which is supply chain risk and resilience. So again, these folks bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and solutions to help us identify, assess, and mitigate and manage supply chain risks. What do we provide over on the right-hand side? 2 certificate courses. of which KnoWerX is affiliated with us. One is a basic course on supply chain risk and resilience. The other is solely dedicated to public health care, supply chain risk and public health care. We do coaching and consulting with clients. We bring solutions. We bring 2 online assessment tools. One is the online readiness assessment, which we'll go through today. And the other is a brand new prescriptive online risk and resilience 90-day action plan, which uses AI and ML algorithms. So we've been busy. We are busy, and we think we have a host of different solution sets to help folks help themselves. So what I wanted to do as well is we use something called Poll Everywhere, pollev.com. I have a couple of internal questions. We'll give it a try. You can answer anonymously, but I'm just trying to get a sense of the audience before we get into individual questions. So if you can use pollev.com/Greg Schlegel 910. If you have a browser on your phone and or another laptop, feel free to get in there and attempt to answer the question. I think we actually have a polling question on the next slide just for us to get a sense of the audience. So let's give it a try. My first question to the audience is, have you exercised the supply chain management assessment tool? I'm just curious to get a sense of if and how many have gone through the tool. So I'll give you 30 seconds, take a shot. I know it's brand new. If it doesn't, there we go. There's one answer, thank you. All right, it's kind of like a horse race, this bar chart. It's always interesting to get an anonymous profile of the audience. So that's good. I'll give you another 5-10 seconds. I'm just curious. Again, it's just me. I thought I'd ask. So if you can get in during the session, I would appreciate. Okay, there's another response. Good. Again, just trying to get a complexion of how many folks in the audience have gotten into the tool. We're getting a good smattering of responses now. Great, terrific, beautiful, good. We got a couple of folks who are 100% complete. We got 30% who are at least halfway through. We got a couple of logged in, but haven't started. That's great. I appreciate it, folks. Thanks a lot. That gives me a good little temperature check of who's on the webinar. Okay, good. Thanks a lot, folks. Let's move on. I wanted to give you a quick profile of the genesis of the tool, because I don't think you may not have gotten that kind of information. For your benefit, there is a report, a kind of a 7-page report in the tool if you haven't gone through it yet. Once you fill out the tool, there's an icon, I think, on the top right where you can actually ask for the Genesis report for the tool. So just want to make people aware of that. Let's just talk about it. It's about 12 years old. It was born out of the first of a kind MBA class at Lehigh University. I think, were one of the first MBA classrooms that dedicated an entire MBA course to supply chain risk management. So it was so well received by the students that we actually took it on the road. The tool has been operating, like I said, for about 10 years. We have almost 3,000 people in 10 years who have run through the tool in many of its different forms. We utilize it in the classroom still, workshops and webinars like this, and client engagements. So we've upgraded the tool. That's the tool you've gone into and are logged into. We've upgraded it. It's now on a learning management system platform. What's it look like on the left? I'll be real brief. You receive a kind of a Likert type chart. It goes from 0 to 10. You can see there's 13 tenets. We think those tenets are critical elements of supply chain management. We color code them. The blue on the top right are strategic. The red on the bottom right are tactical in our mind, and then the green are essentially what we call operational elements. And essentially what we do two things in this tool. If it's not apparent, we measure your supply chain process maturity. And as you can see, the black line that you're looking at on the graph, that is a company's response to the 90-some questions. The closer you are to the green circle, to the 0 element in the chart, the more mature your supply chain processes are, and vice versa. What we also do is, you can see we have 3 circles. The green circle is basically where exemplar companies in both supply chain process and risk operate. From green to orange is you're less mature in your processes and you have more risk. And then you can see the red line, the red circle is what we call the ring of fire. If you have processes outside of that ring, then they are very immature, and that equates to a higher level of risk inside your supply chain. So it's kind of a two-tiered approach. We measure the company's process maturity from our point of view with 40 years in supply chain, and then we also attempt to give you a sense of your risk, your inherent risk within your supply chain. So a couple of top motivations. We'll just keep moving. Sure, we're going to attempt to leverage this to build winning strategies for you. It's a holistic approach, we think, from end to end to capture all the elements in your supply chain. It'll help you transform your manufacturing processes for better productivity, boost your operational health by identifying skills gaps or capabilities, lack of capabilities. To us, it fosters a competitive dialogue because it gives you your as-is situation, and then you can move forward. It kind of confirms your supply chain processes are perhaps at a minimum level to support more sophisticated approaches to supply chain in the future. And really critical to us, we found that it helps companies get better prepared to move into supply chain risk and resiliency. So those are a couple top motivations. I'll go through this one real quick. This is McKinsey. The reason we show you this, and these are vulnerabilities according to McKinsey just recently in 2022 as it relates to supply chain. What they've done is they picked a few critical elements in the supply chain and then gave you a couple of picture profiles by certain industry. Light blue is automotive, dark blue is chemicals, light green is consumer packaged goods, and then they put in pharma as well. The reason I just want to go through this slide very quickly is we wanted to show the alignment between McKinsey's elements and the elements that are in the readiness assessment tool. So you can see the first one, demand variability, is top in their list. We have a tenet in demand management. Sole sourcing, non-sustainable inputs, we have supply and purchasing. Long input lead times from raw materials, again, that's in our supply and purchasing and agility tenets. Low just-in-time inventory, that's logistics for us. Lack of visibility on supplier risks, that's integrated supply chain questions. Concentrated production, we have an adaptive manufacturing arena. risk-prone logistics, again, logistics questions. Again, aging plant equipment, we ask a few questions in adaptive manufacturing. And then finally, short shelf life, we have a tenet in there called S&OP. So I wanted to share that with you, and then I wanted to give you this. I'm not going to go through the 4 tiers, but what you've experienced, those of you who have gone through the tool, is what we call tier 1, and tier 1 is free. All right, all good, but there are several other tiers where you can get more information, more insight, and really start to compare your supply chain to your industry's best in class and competitors. So tier 2 gives you things like strategic, tactical, and operational strength. There's coaching in tier 2. Tier 3, you get tier 1 and tier 2. And in tier 3, we now benchmark you based on your as-is condition. We benchmark your supply chain against the 4 quartiles, whether you're a leader, a follower, average, or laggard, to give you more context and then help you move forward. And then tier 4 is more or less a playbook. That's the whole enchilada. And you get tier 1, 2, and 3. And then what we do as a consultancy is we put together a tailored playbook to accelerate your improvements, to give you a guide. And then there's more coaching as well. So there's more to the tool than just tier 1. I wanted to talk about a little bit of value add, and then we'll get into our final slides. We found this. We looked around early on when we built out the tool to try to find research models and papers on supply chain maturity and financial performance, trying to look at both real quick. And we found one, and we wanted to share that with you. Pretty strong dissertation back in 2009 at the University of Yale. All right. And this gentleman went through and took a look at at 3 hypotheses. All right. And wanted to take a look at supply chain maturity, finance, current finance, and future finance. Yep. So I wanted to take a look because it was interesting. You can see the 3 basic hypotheses, 1, 2, and 3, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But they actually used the SCORE model up on the top right, and then they started to profile the cause and effect relationships between the classical supply chain KPIs. So let's just take a look. 3 hypotheses. The gentleman wanted to take a look at is there a strong correlation between supply chain process maturity and current year financial performance? That was one hypothesis. Second was an effect between prior year financial performance and current year. Understandable. And then the third hypothesis was the effect of prior year financial performance, supply chain process maturity on the financial performance going forward. So essentially what this gentleman found out was, yes, there was a good cause and effect in terms of the SCORE model and all the elements, especially on inventory. Hypothesis 2, he in his mind, he proved it, that prior year performance has an impact on future year performance. And then finally, he said the presence of prior year good financial performance and supply chain process maturity together basically had a strong correlation in terms of inventory management. So the net for us was supply chain process maturities and prior year financial performance have a very strong statistical correlation to your future financial health. All right, so and there's several others, but we wanted to show you this, explain this to you. We think it was spot on, and I wanted to give you one more link between supply chain maturity and financial performance. This is essentially what you learn in MBA 401, is that there are normally quartiles in every industry. No matter what industry you're in, there's mainly 4 quartiles. All the banks look at it this way, all the consultancies. There's leaders, followers, average, and laggards. And essentially, to us, does it pay to be a leader? Yes, we think it does. And why? Here's the 4 quartile complexion you need to be thinking about when it comes to supply chain maturity. If you're in the first quartile, you as a company are buying other companies. You're growing organically and inorganically. You're buying. If you're in the second quartile, you're rationalizing. Perhaps you're even selling non-performing product lines. In the third quartile, companies are being bought. If you're there, other companies are looking at you to purchase you. And if you're in the fourth quartile of your industry, chances are you are struggling with cash and other elements, and you may have to go out of business. All right. So it's not a pretty sight, but we in the multiple tiers in our tool, this is what we attempt to position you in terms of where are you based on your answers going through the multiple tiers to try to position you and then move you forward, maybe up the quartile scale. So we wanted to share that with you. I'm not going to ask this question. I'm gonna keep going to the next one because I know you all have a lot of questions. I'll just tee up. I said we have about 2,000-3,000 people who have used the tool. Yes, these are just some assessment testimonials from different industries. We've gotten a lot of good feedback over the years. I just wanted to share these with you to let you know that we've had just about everyone go through or come through the tool across almost every industry sector, including healthcare supply chain. So with that, I'll give you one example and then we're pretty much done and we'll answer all your questions. Many of you may know Zara. Zara is a high performance retail apparel company out of Spain. We had a chance to sit with them and talk with them, and they utilized this tool back in 2015. You can actually see their results in the bottom right. They went through the same tool you have access to. As you can see, their black as is line was pretty close to level 3, which is the circle where exemplars operate. And you can see down in about what, 5 o'clock, they had one big outlier, and that was information systems. And they agreed with us, and the outlier was IT systems because in 2015, they had over 25 1970-like systems all cobbled together supporting their performance, and they were doing quite well. They were still the best in terms of supply chain performance and risk management. But they took that as a validation because we're pretty sure they knew that they couldn't move forward with a 5-year plan to go into 4G, 5G with their customers. So what did they do? They took their good cash flow performance and built out a multi-million-dollar supply chain war room. And I'll show it to you in a minute because they're pretty darn good. We've actually gone through and gone through tier 2 and profiled their strengths, and the lower the number, the higher the strength. And their operational elements were very strong. And you can see there's a tight-knit arena between operational, strategic, and tactical. So they're pretty darn good at supply chain performance and risk management. And they actually took their money and built, a couple years ago, we don't know where it is, they built this supply chain management risk war room. All right. So I wanted to share that with you. Accelerating time to value. This essentially, folks, is why we advocate the approach, you can take a look at some of the statistics. These come from exemplar supply chain performance companies. All right, revenue growth, profitability, capital utilization, lowering the cost of capital. You can take a look at it. They're pretty impressive, and this is what the exemplars. This is how they perform every day. So with that, I'll close the presentation with thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about it. I'm glad a good portion of you have gone through it. Remember, it's free. All right. We're very interested in your comments about how you felt about the process, who you collaborated with. Did you get any surprises? Did you see surprises? And if so, what were the surprises? And then over time, not just here, but going forward, if you have additional questions, either when you finish or afterward, just feel free to hit our website, ping me or Jim DeVries, our managing director, and we'd be more than willing to answer any questions you might have on the tool. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ravindra, and we can go through any questions that you all have. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. It was a wonderful session. I'm sure everybody got some answers to this question. A lot of questions. I received a lot of questions from prospective participants, and I think most of them were related to the question of how to measure supply chain risk and how to mitigate them and how to do planning and how to make my organization more resilient. I think this is a very, very big question. I don't know whether it can be answered in such a small time. But we obviously have a certification program that you can approach to us, and you can go through a certification program that will probably give you a lot of information. Greg, what would you like to say about this?
Well, it is. It could be considered a daunting task, folks. What we have found is over the last couple of years, we coach companies in supply chain risk and resilience. Yes, we do. We try to understand their risk maturity. This is the other tool I talked about. For a fee-based approach, you go through an additional tool, and it will tell you where you are in our 5-stage supply chain maturity model. We have one. It'll tell you and us what your risk appetite is, because you really need to understand, this is critical. If you're going to advocate risk management, mitigation in your company, and you're going to be the tip of the spear, and you're going to advocate for funding, money, people, you need to understand what your company's risk appetite is. Truthfully, really, I'm telling you, this is a risk to you. If you don't know your company's risk appetite and you begin to push hard on risk mitigation, you can run into a brick wall, and it can get worse than that. So we advocate again using this other tool to identify what your risk appetite is in your company before you move on. Once you understand what the risk appetite is, and there's only 4 perspectives. Once you understand that, then essentially the other tool we're talking about gives you an action plan, a computer-generated action plan based on your risk maturity, as we see it, your risk appetite, and your risk culture, your operating culture. So we've been doing this for a couple years, and it has really been well received. We have almost 50 different companies who have run through this other tool. But what we found, folks, is that many, many, many companies are not totally ready for supply chain risk and resiliency. Why? Because their supply chain processes are very, very immature. And so we built out the tool we're talking about today, the supply chain management assessment and maturity tool, to help organizations understand where they are relative to supply chain maturity, and then help them build out the other, let's say, immature processes to get them very well positioned to essentially move into supply chain risk. Now, that's a long answer to maybe a short question, but essentially, we're compelled to tell you that. All right, not so that you go and buy and lease the tool. No, it's you need to understand that not all organizations are ready to get into a bona fide formal supply chain risk and resiliency program. And so we've put this tool together to at least give you free a sense of how mature your processes are, and then maybe improve some of the weak processes, and then start thinking about supply chain risk. Now, that might not answer your question to say, well, my goodness, I'm paying 10x for my logistics, all my carriers, all air freight. I'm paying an enormous amount of money for logistics. Yes, you are, because of the pandemic. You're not alone. Every single industry sector is wrestling with the same thing. We have the bullwhip effect, folks. That bullwhip effect has been in our business for 45 years. It's just the pandemic and other disruptions have increased the amplitude of the bullwhip effect and the latency in lead time between demand and supply. I don't have a $64,000 silver bullet question for you or an answer for you. It's just we know you're wrestling with the bullwhip effect. If anything, if I could answer any question in general, I would say, listen, look to your suppliers, communicate with your suppliers every day, especially if they're affected still by the pandemic or another disruption, and essentially start thinking about building a supplier dashboard. There are tools and techniques out there. There are now companies out there, many of them are in the consortium, that essentially do the heavy lifting for you. We have one friend of the consortium, they're not in it, a company called Resilink. They have 200,000 facilities in their community, and they rank those facilities every 6 months in terms of their risk and resiliency. You might want to take a look at that. You might be pleasantly surprised that many of your tier 1, tier 2 suppliers are already in that community. So that's one, I'll say, silver bullet that you can essentially leverage, and that is talk to Resilink. It's a subscription base, you pay as you go. We don't get any remuneration from you getting engaged with them. They're doing a good deal for supply chain risk. And it might just surprise you how many tier 1, tier 2 companies that are suppliers that you have are actually resident in their community. And once you're in the community, now you get a dashboard. You immediately have a dashboard on many of your suppliers in terms of their production rate, their service levels, their geopolitical risk, their financial health. It's very, very compelling. We use them a lot when we're in large, complex supply chain assessments. It accelerates our time to value, because all we have to do is go in there and take a look and see how many tier 1, tier 2s, tier 3s are already being evaluated, and we bring that to bear to accelerate the time to value. So those are just 2 or 3 threads that I can share with the audience, and I'm here for the next 25 minutes. I'll answer any question you might have.
Thanks, Greg. there were a lot of questions around the tools, techniques available, so that I think a lot of answers have been given. Nistush also has posted a link of the free tool available to you. Greg has already sent those with that link, and we have posted on the chat box. You can use that link to assess the free tool that is available and do some of your assessment, how your organization is doing in terms of risk assessment and resilience. You can do that. So several people ask questions about how AI, IoT, ML, big data, and all that will influence supply chain maturity. I think there is another tool available from the consortium. That is the second tool that is based on, I think, AI, ML. That is what I heard from Greg. So Greg, would you like to talk about tools and AI, ML and so on?
Yeah, sure. Again,
so, just
go
before
ahead.
that, sorry to interrupt. Sorry to
Go ahead.
interrupt. So to all the audience, once you take the assessment tool, you'll get your result. You'll know where you're standing, what is the position. You can always come back to us. Basically, you can always connect with Mr. Ravindra, or you can connect with Greg to have a way forward to analyze what is the best way forward in terms of education or process or consulting or whatever you require. You would have all the data with you to know where you have to go and where you are. So you can always connect back with us, and we can form a solution which is specifically towards you. And there's a very important question before before the question which you have been asked you regarding the tool. There's a very important and a very nice question by Mr. Parag, which he has mentioned regarding the assessment. So it is basically, if it's a 90-day regime to assess and do improvement, what sort of data is required? So what should they be expecting? Should be the data with them before they start the assessment?
It's a good question. If we're talking about the other tool, the 90-day assessment using AI and ML, it's not so much data. It's really your opinion and perspective on risk. All right, because it's not like this other tool that we're talking about, the 90-day, which after you and there's a little bit more involved in this tool. It's not just a one-person answer. To do the tool, we ask at least 5 to 8 different executives from your organization. So that takes some time, and that's a little different commitment. Once you have those 5 to 8 executives, then essentially they go through individually, not a group think. We want those individual perspectives on risk management in your company. So this other tool doesn't question your capability or your maturity in terms of supply chain and all the things you use. These questions are geared around how does your company and individuals in your company perceive risk management. And then it goes through those 92 some odd questions. It harmonizes all of them using AI and ML. All of our 12 years of intellectual property, it's all codified in the algorithms. And essentially, once it sees what your overall maturity level is from a risk point of view, and what your risk appetite seems to be in your company, and your operational propensity, which is really your operating culture, meaning, are you bureaucratic? Are you slow? Are you agile? Those are the kind of questions that we ask. And once we have those 3 answers and they're harmonized, then the actual tool uses personas. We've gone through and used FMEA. We have a lot of master black belts. We put together about 200 to 300 personas, in terms of combination permutations, and it gives you a 5 to 8 action item in sequence based on who you are, where you are, and how you operate. This is what the algorithms basically say you would have a good high probability of completing in 90 days. And then after the 90 days, and with the tool, With the other tool, you actually get several hours of consulting. So we go through a process of checkpoint calls. We produce a report for you. It's a McKinsey-like report. It's about 70 pages, and we give you a host of insights along with the action items, and then we lead, guide, direct, and coach you so that you can complete those 5 to 8 action items, complete them, do well, and then we talk about going forward. So it's an approach to take an as is condition, but on risk, and then give you a couple of action items to move you off the dime, if you will, to get you started on a bona fide supply chain risk program. So I hope I gave you some insight on that question.
Thanks, Greg. So before I hand it over to Nistush to ask more questions, there's one question which have been asked by people on the benchmarking. I think you touched something upon that. There's also one question on benchmarking in pharma industry. So would you like to say how to go about benchmarking specific industry sectors?
Yeah, sure. And that's good. We wanted to share with you that benchmarking is in the tool we're talking about, the supply chain management and maturity assessment tool. Again, we've gone through, I want to say close to 3,000 different individuals have gone through this assessment tool over 12 years. And what we've done is we've kind of built a database like a Bloomberg database, a DMB, it's pretty wide and pretty deep. And then what we've done is we've run algorithms to identify the different industries, categorize them, codify and categorize, and then we've run analyses to essentially look at all the answers that if you've gone through the tool, you now know your as is. We've taken those thousands of answers, individual companies, and put together a profile by industry sector in terms of what is good, what's a leader look like, what does an average look like, what does a laggard look like, and so forth. And essentially in tier 3 of the assessment, the supply chain assessment tool, we can position your company into one of those quartiles, and then essentially through coaching and consulting, we can either help you solidify and improve a good quartile picture, and or we can help you improve if you're in, let's say, the 3rd quartile, to make sure that we can help you move up in the quartile. Because I know I'm going back and forth here. Here's what we see, folks. At the moment, we are all destined to go through a downturn. All right? It's coming. In fact, we think in the US we're already there. But there's a couple of quarters going forward that all the predictions, and we agree, we're going to see a pretty big drop in GDP across the globe. When that happens, and we've done many webinars on this, when that happens, it's ripe for mergers and acquisitions. In fact, in 2021, mergers and acquisitions, the activity level and the dollar value in US billions of dollars was the highest since 2004. It will be the same in 2022 and in 2023. And this is why we are advocating that you get a good understanding of what your supply chain maturity looks like and where you are positioned in your industry, because we don't want you to fall into the 3rd or 4th quartile, because that puts your supply chain and your enterprise at risk, because there will be opportunistic companies out there looking for intellectual property for the people and your tools, techniques, and your products at a 10 cents on the dollar. So, and I'm not trying to be glib or paint an ugly picture, but we know it's coming our way across the entire globe. So we're attempting to advocate that folks make sure they understand where their supply chain maturity resides in terms of the 4 quartiles to help them help themselves and not get into a bad situation over the next 3 quarters. Hopefully I gave you some insight on that question.
Thanks, Greg. And I will hand it over to Nistush now. There are a lot of questions which are asked in the chat box. Also, I see one hand raised by Mayur Parvani. So, Nistush, would you go ahead and read those questions?
Yeah. Hello. Good evening.
Yes, sure. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll request Mr. Mayur to please ask his question first.
Okay. Good evening, Greg. I have just one question. How can we link our supply chain KPIs like the OTIFs, inventory management, logistic management, warehouse management with your supply chain risk management?
It's a good question. It is a good question. It's not the easiest thing to do. All right. We all know what the KPIs are. Many of us are certified in Apex, ASCM, and other organizations. So, the KPIs are one thing. All right. Linking them to, let's say, an assessment, we don't really do that in the tool. But essentially, remember what the tool that you're exercising now, the tool that is in front of you, the supply chain management assessment tool, what we're attempting to do is get the dialogue going within your own group, within your supply chain group, within your operations group, or an enterprise if you're that small. Get the dialogue going to say, what are we good at and what are we not so good at? And boom, pick those outliers like Zara did. Zara basically found one outlier, and that's why I wanted to share with you the example. They knew, we found out they knew that the existing 30-year-old software was not going to support their 5-year vision going forward. They wanted someone to come in and give an objective viewpoint, and boom, they saw it. And what was it? It was IT systems. And that's not necessarily a KPI, but what they did is they more or less said, yes, you're absolutely right. You validated it. They took their cash flow and they upgraded their IT systems to the point of building out a supply chain risk and management war room. And they look at their KPIs every day, 24/7, 365. Now, how you align your existing supply chain management KPIs to the assessment tool, it really isn't doing that. It's trying to give you an objective as is positioning, and then essentially you and your team can start to take a look at, let's say, the outliers and try to improve them. And if you focus, think of it, it's trying to give you some focus on what do I do next to improve my supply chain maturity. It gives you a focus, and then within that focus area, whatever it is that you are not very strong at the moment, inside that focus area, you can have a couple of KPIs. You can validate with your KPIs in that element or in that tenet that, yeah, we, our on time in full is not that great, or our inventory turnover ratio is not that great. And so it doesn't overtly help you align your KPIs, but it will bring focus to a certain element within your supply chain, and then you can look hard at those KPIs and try to improve them. That I hope I gave you some insight on that.
Sounds good. I think.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
So we'll just take the next question.
Mhm.
Any specific assessment tools for the dynamic 3PL to balance between the supply chain risks and P&L?
It's a good question. Yes, that is a good question. In the tool we're talking about here, the supply chain assessment tool, there are actually two assessments inside the platform. And we didn't really talk about that, and that's a good point. In the initial login, when you log into the platform, it will ask you, I think, 8 or 9 questions and then send you into the appropriate tool. And one of the key questions in those 8 elements is, do you manufacture product or don't you? If you are not a manufacturer and you don't convert product, you go to another tool, and it's a service tool, and it deals with service organizations like 3PLs. It's not so much driven by public healthcare, but it's a service oriented set of questions. And so we don't ask you how you manufacture and what tools you, that's not the questions you get. You get more or less service level questions, especially if you are a logistician and you're moving product from point A to point B to point C. So that's a very good question. And I hope folks who filled out the assessment tool already basically didn't miss that question. And if you did, you can always go back in and go into and answer that overtly to say, I'm a service organization, I'm a 3PL, and it's going to send you to a secondary set of questions, and you'll get the same chart, but you'll have different questions that are geared around logistics as opposed to, yes, I'm a manufacturer. So hopefully I answered that question.
Perfect. So the question was asked by Mr. Yogesh, and he did mention that they are into service industry. So definitely answers the question.
Okay.
The next one
Mhm.
is from Rajendran. As a manufacturing sector, we would like to know the best approach on how do we mitigate the risk of globalization, global supplies, imports, etc.
It's a good question. It's a $64,000 question. If I'm not scoffing, but if I had I wish I had a silver bullet for you. If you're in a global supply chain, folks, you have latency, you have the bullwhip effect. What we can basically say initially, there is one thing you can do, all right, and that is it's twofold. One, identify your key suppliers, and don't identify them to say, yes, we buy this product from them and this is the price. No, you need to understand who you buy from and where are they located. That's the key in supply chain risk, not what they sell you and the price. It's where are they located geopolitically, all right, logistically, all right. That's the first thing. And the second one is, okay, now you've mapped, and we advocate this, map those suppliers. Think of supply chain mapping. You can do it manually. Take a small product line, folks, with 10 stock keeping units. Maybe it's global, but keep it small and go through a mapping exercise and put up on the wall. I don't care what tool you use, Post-it notes, PowerPoint, VisiCalc, I don't care. Map that supply chain from customers through suppliers. Put it up on the board. Then connect the dots. Draw flow diagrams so that you can see the flow of the material, and then identify those key suppliers and maybe maybe some key contract manufacturers, and then start to talk about where they are and what risks they've experienced already, or what risks could happen to those contract manufacturers or those suppliers. Now you're getting somewhere. And trust me, if you do that, it's going to take a couple of hours. We do it all the time for clients. We facilitate that. It becomes a wow meeting. Bring everybody together in a conference room who touches that supply chain. Keep it small. Everybody, including sales and marketing, and then go through the mapping exercise. And if you want further details on that, you just send either KnoWerX or myself an email, and we will send you a little 2-3 page kind of primer to lead, guide, direct, and coach you on how to do it. That's how important it is. Map the supply chain, then show the flow, connect the dots, and start talking about what node has experienced what kind of risk, and or what kind of risk could they experience, not just what they've experienced, but what could happen with this contractor who is in earthquake bound type. That's the kind of thing I would advocate to you. And when you're done, it's a wow factor. People will walk away with saying, wow, that was great. And now, now the question is, what do we do if we do that? Well, maybe you find out, I'm just going through things that have happened with us folks. Maybe you go find out that one of your key suppliers is 45% of the raw material for one of your best selling finished goods. What the heck do you do? And oh, by the way, they've had 2 or 3 risk experiences already. They're in an earthquake arena. All right, what do I do? Maybe you think about getting a secondary source, folks. It takes time and money, but how do you feel about that? You know, what is your risk? That's what we advocate in terms of supply chain mapping. You can do it on your own, and if you want, you just ping us and let us know, and we can send you a little 3-page primer. That is unbelievably helpful to anyone who wants to at least start talking about risk in their supply chain. Hope I provided some insight there.
Yeah, that's really great insight, Greg. So we just moving towards the end. So we'll take last 2 questions. The next
Okay.
one is from Amarjeet. Is there a different evaluation between risk and maturity of elements that is within our control and which is outside our control?
It's a good question. The answer is yes. All right. There are several types of risks. All right. One is called strategic risk, which are basically things like tsunamis, earthquakes, weather-related, geopolitical risk, tax and regulations. Those are all risks that we do not control. All right. Really, we do not. But you might we don't throw in the towel and say, well, we just have to deal with them. What you do with those strategic risks, folks, is you can plan for them. If you have a strategic risk in front of you and you agree that it's strategic, meaning several of our suppliers are in a very testy geopolitical arena, you can build out mitigation plans. Go through some scenarios. All right. We train folks all the time. The scenario planning is actually in our online courseware and so forth to say, all right, we have a risk. We don't know if it'll ever come to fruition, but if it does, if someone nationalizes our supplier in that particular country, what do? Let's put together a game plan. First, we would do this, then we would do that, then we would do this. How long will it take? Who's responsible? That's called scenario planning and building a risk mitigation plan. So you can plan for tsunamis, earthquakes, you can. And we hope that they never come to fruition. The other type of risk is a tactical and operational risk. Those are things that happen inside your supply chain. You tell us and we say to anyone, these are things that we control. All right. Those are things like your supply chain management processes. If you go through the assessment and you have a few outliers that are very weak, you can improve those supply chain processes. You don't have to go outside. You know what they are. Here it is. And in fact, in the tool, folks, just to give you an insight, if you haven't seen this already, the tool that you're going through is actually a maturity roadmap. So once you answer the questions and you have your answers, you have your chart, you can go back into the tool and you can see your as is condition. And then if it is quite immature, you can move from left to right and you can see what to do to improve your particular tenant. It doesn't tell you how to do it, but it does give you a roadmap for that specific tenant. And all those questions, whether it's supply purchasing, whether it's adaptive manufacturing, whether it's S&OP, it actually tells you what you might think about doing next to improve. It doesn't tell you how, but it does tell you what to think about. And so those are tactical and operational risks that you have some control over. All right. And if you want, you can understand and find all those tactics and techniques in our online course. If you go through the online course, come through KnoWerX, go through our course, you will be enlightened. You will have all those tactics and techniques that you can use to mitigate the tactical and operational risks. So two major types of risks. Strategic, I would advocate build out a scenario, put together a mitigation plan, and hope it never comes to fruition. If it does, you pull out the plan and you execute it. Tactical and operational risks, those are things you can control, and you can essentially use the tool, and you can also go through the online course to get a good complexion of what those tactics are to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage the risks that are in your own supply chain. All right, so hopefully I gave you some insight there.
Perfect. I think the last point related to skills is what the last question is also regarding. It is from Abhijit. So is there any parameter to measure supply chain talent risks? That is skilled people leaving the organization impact.
Yeah,
The
boy, that's a
operations.
tough one. Yeah, that is a real tough question, folks. The talent management, talent is a strategic risk. As an academic, we can't, here in the US, we can't graduate enough supply chain management 4-year degree people. We cannot. There's so much demand for talent and not enough supply yet. So we in academia are wrestling with that. But I'm not sure there's a KPI to evaluate. I'd have to think about that. If someone wants to ask that question to me personally in an email, we have 31 different companies in the consortium, and we have a couple of companies who are into ESG, in economic, social governance. We have a couple of companies who are master black belts and continuous improvement professionals. They, I think, have some tools, but I'd have to understand what the question is, and then I would forward it to one of those organizations who do that for a living. And if and when they render an opinion, we'll send that right back to you. That's the best offer I can provide.
All right, great. So is it fine if I share your email address with everyone in the group here?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Not a problem. Again, we're looking for, we're here to help. We are evangelists. All right. If you have any questions on either of the tools, if you have questions about our online courses that go through KnoWerX, just send me the emails and I'll do my best to answer every question as quickly as we can. So that's what we're all about.
The participants, I've shared the email address of Greg and as well as mine. So if you have any questions that needs to be answered, you can always send it to me. I will route it to Greg or however you wish to. We're always there to help. So with this note, I'll hand over to Ravi sir for his closing remarks. And from my end, thank you to Greg and Ravi sir for hosting this and to all the participants to attend. Over to you.
I would say thanks to everyone. Thanks to Greg. Thanks to participants. I think the session was very, very lovely, very lively. People got a lot of information. And I'm sure there are so many questions which got unanswered and we could have continued for another hour. That would have been less also. But anyway, we have to stop here. Thanks so much, everyone. And yeah, as Nistush said, if you have any questions, you can approach Nistush or you can approach Greg. Okay, we'll be able to help you. And the tool that you have, you can use that tool that is free to you. And I would suggest that you log in, give your responses and see for yourself where do you stand. And if you need any help, we can do that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. All the best.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll stop the recording here, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So we can log off now. Thank you so much.